Hello, today I'm going to be making a pair of scrolling pliers. So I want to try something a little bit different with this, as I need to make a new pair anyway, but I want to try making them out of mild steel, whereas before, when I made these previously, I've made them out of, almost a tool steel, a high carbon steel, so they don't bend during use. But what I want to try and do is make a pair out of mild steel, but just forge them thick, so that there's more mass in there, there's more material, so hopefully when we're using those, they won't bend quite as much, and also it's a little bit easier to forge. But the main thing is you can then quench these tongs, as you can quench them without the fear of them breaking. So this is a pair of scrolling pliers, or tongs, whatever you want to call them, that I made probably 2 years ago when I moved into this building, and it was based off a pair that I sort of learnt to forge with Bill Carter. So he used to do his scrolling tongs like this, with a flat bit with a radius corner over the edge, a nice taper, but short, so a short pair. I mean, I think his were even shorter than this. There are positives to having a bit of a flat on the jaw. You know, you can get a bit more of surface area contact on the piece that you're bending if it's a rectangular bar or whatever, and so you won't bruise it up quite as badly. But then when you are bending something like a round bar, these corners can dig in and cause bruising. So what I want to do is make a pair of these, but with round jaws, rounded tapers on the jaws, and probably a little bit smaller. This pair was made of sort of a high carbon steel. I think it was a spring steel that I actually used to make this. It's not heat treated, it's just a bit of a tougher steel. And the pair that I used to use with Bill Carter, those were, I think they were old files. So again, another tough steel, so they don't bend when you're using them. However, today I want to see if we can make a pair of these scrolling pliers out of mild steel. So I'm going to make it out of mild steel, but I'm going to leave a lot of material, so it's a bulky pair of tongs, so they have a bit more strength, rather than you see these reins are really thin, and also the actual jaws themselves are a bit thin. So I'm going to leave everything a bit more bulky, and hopefully they'll be fine as a pair out of mild steel, and they won't bend during use. An upside of using mild steel is you can quench your tongs, whereas quenching these, you don't want to do that because it is a high carbon steel. You quench it, you're going to run the risk of these jaws snapping, which actually happened on my last pair that I made. I made a pair of these, I don't know, maybe four years ago, around that time. Made a pair of these and the jaws just snapped off during use, which is a bit of a surprise when it happens. Putting it under tension and then it suddenly gives way and you're like, what's happened? And you look at your jaws and half of it's missing. So that's not the best thing to do when making a pair of tongs. So hopefully we can make a nice pair of mild steel scrolling pliers. So I've got a piece of 20 by 10 heating up in the fire, which is what we're going to use to forge out the reins of this pair of tongs. And so this is a piece that I've made earlier, which, as you can see, it is going to be a small pair of tongs. It's more pliers, a pair of scrolling pliers. That's what I would call them, really. And so I've got to make one exactly the same as this. So they're not mirror images. They are exactly the same. So all the processes are the same, which is what I'm going to show you now. So if we come on the near edge, and I've made a mark at 1 inch. If we isolate off that material, so this is going to be the sort of end of our tongs. I've come over to the smaller anvil, as I've got this hardy block in the anvil, so I can actually forge a taper on the end of here without either dinging the anvil with my hammer or messing up the shoulder that we've created on the near side. And if we now knock the corners off and then roll to get a round. So I've got to lay off a bit of material, so I'm turning clockwise to about the 45 and then forge half on, half off, just to create a bit of a shoulder, and then flatten some material down for the boss. Lay off about an inch, half on, half off. Begin to isolate the back of the boss. I'll begin to draw out the reins whilst I've got all this heat on the bar back here. I'll draw the reins down a little bit more. Not quite to final dimensions. Just neaten them up a little bit and then we'll go back and forge the boss again. We've got a nice high heat and we can come and carefully sort of smoosh this bolster in, cleaning up the perimeter and adding a little bit more width. I keep on calling it the bolster, I mean the boss. So we're smooshing the material in, gaining a little bit of width on the boss. The boss is looking pretty nice now, it's pretty clean. We've got some sharp corners on. You can come and round those corners off if you want. I don't really see the point in it, you know, I don't think it increases the performance of the tong, it's just an aesthetic thing, and I quite like it having nice sharp corners. So something that we do need to note on performance is the boss should be the thickest area of the tong as you're looking back on the rein. So it doesn't matter about the jaw, as you can see our jaw there is thicker than the boss. But the boss then wants to be the thickest section out of the reins. So you can see we've got to take the width of all of this material down by quite a bit so that this is all thinner than here, as this is going to be the pivot point. And so if we have a thicker bit here, it can just get in the way of actually using the tongs, as the reins will hit each other when you're trying to close the gap between the jaws. So the next step is drawing all of this material down into a nice round bar. We've got our two halves of our tongs nice and forged out. You can see how they're going to go together. They're rather, you know, they are bulky, which is what I wanted. We want lots of material in there so they're not going to bend easily during use. A couple of key points, as I said, that is going to be the thickest section of the reins. And then the reins themselves, what I actually did was forge a circle, knock these two corners down so that it becomes an oval. So you can see the end there, it's an oval. So that's going to be a really strong shape when you're using it, as we've got a longer section of steel here and a shorter here, which is just, you know, it's less likely to now bend in this plane, which is where we're going to be putting the pressure on the tongs. And then it's got a nice rounded edge on both of these sides, so it's comfortable to use. You can see as well, I've also just taken a quick rasp on the reins to smooth them out so there's no sort of sharp facets on them. The next thing to do is center punch a couple of marks on the bosses and then drill. I'm going to drill the holes rather than punching them hard, as the reins are cool now, so I might as well just drill the holes. I'm thinking for the rivet, generally the bigger the rivet that you can fit in the boss, the better. But I think I'm going to go with probably an 8mm rod for a rivet rather than say a 10mm, just because the boss is a little bit small on this pair of pliers. Got the holes drilled. You can see now how they're going to come together, and this is the little length of bar that I'm going to use for the rivet. So we've got to rivet them together and then just faff about with the jaws and the reins to make sure we can actually use the pair of tongs. So we can use the ball peen to create a bit of a domed rivet head. So you see, I can't really open the tongs. I can just open them, but we've got to loosen them off. So to do that, just give it a couple of knocks. And it'll loosen that rivet. So I can use this little bit of stock as a spacer as we close the jaws up. So I put a little block in the back of the tongs there whilst I just tap them closed a little bit more. I'm really happy with how this pair of tongs has turned out. I think they look really clean. They're hopefully going to be a nice new tool to have in the workshop, not only to look at, but to actually use. And it's sort of all of that, you know, tools to make tools. As the blacksmith, you know, you need something, you make it, and it's then nice to have and use every day to make other things. If you've enjoyed this video, let me know, because I'm thinking about doing sort of a series on making a load of pairs of tongs, because the ones that I have at the moment are sort of, they're not really up to scratch. I want to make a load of new pairs of tongs, so it's just whether or not I film them. So I'm going to do it anyway. Let me know if you think you want some videos. So I'll be making like bolt jaw tongs, maybe a couple of wolf jaw tongs, all sorts of different styles. So let me know if you want me to do some videos on those. I think it might be quite interesting, so I might do it anyway. But thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.